Hello petals, my name is Anais. I am a womb witch, a Rahani energy teacher, and a plant alchemist. Under Unfurling Alchemy, I guide women in reconnecting with their power, awakening their essence, and step into sovereignty. In these episodes, I am going to approach topics around womb mysteries, energy healing, and cyclic living. Hello my petals. So in this episode I wanted to approach a quite deep topic, something that has been really ingrained within my healing journey, and I think also within a lot of other people's healing journey, which is why I wish to talk about this today. And it is this idea, this concept that we are broken. So very often when we begin exploring healing, spirituality, therapy, personal growth, whatever we want to call it, or wherever we're at, we come into that journey carrying this quite deep ingrained belief that something inside us is fundamentally wrong, that something inside us is damaged, that we are broken and we are just broken goods. And the purpose of our healing journey is somehow to fix those broken parts. And for a very long time, that is actually something that I deeply, deeply believed about myself. I cannot even describe to you how convinced I was that I was broken. I really believed that through the different layers of the experiences that I had of like the childhood, the family dynamics, the traumas and experiences, through all of like the crunchy, ugly, uncomfortable and messy things that have happened in my life, that parts of me had simply shattered, that I had been broken in so many pieces that I was never ever going to be whole again. That I was never going to be able to be whole again, because when a vase like falls on the floor and shattered in so many pieces, we can put as much glue as we want on it. It may just be that part of it has just become dust and it would just never fit back in again. And so I was so convinced that that was me, that was going to be my experience for the rest of my life, that the best I could hope was to glue the pieces back enough that I wasn't going to be completely broken. And I was so convinced about this at the time that I remember having this conversation with one of my past lovers from many moons ago. And we were speaking about this. We were speaking about the layers of trauma that I was carrying and the healing that I was doing, and how people rebuild themselves after different difficult experiences. And a little while later, after that discussion, they actually gave me this Japanese bowl that had been prepared with gold. I can't exactly remember how it's called. I think it's kitsungi or something like that, but don't hold me to this. And so when that bowl broke, the pieces were repaired with this coating, with this lacquer mixed in with gold dust. So instead of hiding the cracks, they highlight them. The fractures become part of the beauty. The beauty of the bowl was actually like this gold that were on those rebuilt pieces. And when they gave me this bowl, they said, oh, this is how I see you, like everything that has broken you has made you more beautiful. And at the time, I felt so lucky, I felt like so moved by that someone finally understood me. And I felt like someone that saw that I had been broken, but that I had done the work to be pulled back together again with this, precious, precious gold. And I kept that for so long with me. And that metaphor I kept with me as well for so long. And as the years went by, somehow like that story started to shift for me, because at some point I was like, wait a second. I actually never was broken. Not once. I'm not broken. You are not broken. We are not broken. And I think something as well that I have noticed over the years walking this path is that people tend to arrive on a spiritual journey from two different directions. if I look at people around me over the last decade, those are those two pathways that appear again and again quite clearly, actually. And again, here I'm talking about archetypal work. So those are archetypes, and therefore they are an oversimplification of things. As humans, we are really complex. And so, here we are simplifying things to bring it back together into this lens, into this perspective. So what I wanted to say is that when I am looking at the people around me that are walking this path of spiritual connection, I can see two different ways that people have come on the path. And so the first one comes through what we might want to call like as a moment of remembering. So sometimes it happens through an alternate state of consciousness, through psychedelics, through deep meditation, to being in an incredibly powerful place in nature, or into a temple, a sanctuary, a place that just has this really strong energetics. It can also be through like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, for example. And so there are in that moment where suddenly the veil feels thin, and they experience themselves as part of this deeply connected being, deeply connected with everything around them, connected to this greater consciousness, to spirit, to God, to, whatever language you want to use for this. But they really feel like this being part of something much larger than themselves. And it's like this powerful remembering that they are part of something much larger than themselves. And for people that arrive like through that doorway on the spiritual path, often then their search becomes of how to remain in that connected way, how to remain connected to the sense of oneness without the alternate state of mind, without the psychedelics, or without being in a specific place, but really learning how to live from that place from within, and how to keep returning to it. There is also another doorway that I see just as often, and that has been my personal doorway into this work as well. And it comes kind of like from the opposite direction, but again, not one is better than the other. But this one, it comes more from like the depths. It comes from the underworld, from people who have walked really through darkness, that have walked through their own personal underworld and spiraled through that. The people that have experienced really that deep pain, that deep grief, that deep trauma. And then there is a moment in there where life becomes just so heavy that something inside us start asking questions. Like something inside us just came to this realization that there must be more to life. Life cannot just be this. It cannot just be this torment. It cannot just be this turmoil. There must be more to life than this. And that question, that deep, quiet, or loud, persistent question, then really creates this search, this impulse to search for meaning, to search for healing, to search for a way to rewrite the story. And so the journey begins from the underworld upward. Now, of course, as I said before, those are archetypes. There are many other ways people find their paths. But this is again just when I have been looking around me, those two doorways, those two pathways have appeared again and again. Either reaching upwards from the depths of that underworld, or remembering something sacred and then searching how to stay connected to it. And what I have noticed is that when the journey begins from the underworld, especially from that underworld spiral, from that pain, from that survival, from that trauma, it is very easy to enter the healing world with that belief that we are broken, that something inside us needs to be repaired, that some kind of, that we are some kind of project that needs fixing. that we need to gather tools and techniques to somehow rebuild ourselves into something whole. And that belief can stay with us for a very long time. I believe until we are ready to shift that story. Because what I eventually realized really is that my system adapted. It responded to the environment that I was living in, to the experiences that I went through, the things that, I had to survive. And those adaptations sometimes created patterns that later in life just no longer were serving me. But those adaptations, they aren't the same as brokenness. A nervous system that learned how to survive is not broken. A heart that protected itself is not broken. A mind that developed strategy to cope and masks to cope is not broken. It is intelligence. It is protection. It is doing exactly what was needed at the time. So very often when we call dysfunction, or what we call dysfunctional, is actually a way of surviving. Like people pleasing, hyper independence, being overly responsible, or, emotionally shut down, perfectionism, anxiety. They are not just random flaws in the system. They are not just random things that are broken about us. They are strategies. And yes, we can talk about the fact, they're good or bad strategies, but they're strategies. They're strategies, they're adaptations that we went through to be able to respond to our environment. There are ways that the body and our mind learned how to navigate the world safely. The problem is that those strategies then often remain far too long. They remain even after we're out of that environment, even when our environment has changed and we are now in a place of safety, in a place where we don't need those anymore. It's how do we move away from those? And so later in life, we find ourselves like repeating patterns that once, kept us safe, but now they are keeping us stuck. And when you notice those patterns, we often jump to the conclusion that something inside us is wrong, that we are broken. But what if the story is actually different? What if we are not broken? What if we were never broken? What if we simply carry those adaptations and the adaptations that no longer serve us? What if the compass inside us has simply been pulled slightly out of calibration, right? Our own inner compass. I talk so much about following our own inner compass. What about if it's just like slightly out of whack? Just the calibration is slightly off due to the experiences that we had. So for me, there is just like this different way now to look at healing. Not as fixing broken pieces, but at recalibrating our inner compass. When we experience trauma, difficult environments, or long periods just being absolutely stuck in survival mode, our inner orientation, can become a little bit distorted. And we begin making decisions based on, what has kept us safe in the past. Not based on what is actually true in the moment, what is actually true in the present. And we override our systems, we override our signals, we mistrust our instincts, we disconnect from our body. And over time, that disconnect can really create this feeling that something inside us is wrong. But often the signals are still there. The body still knows. The inner compass is still present. It is simply harder to hear. Which means that for me, the healing journey becomes less about fixing ourselves and more about learning how to listen again. Listen to the body, listen to our womb, listen to the emotions, listen to those subtle signals that are telling us exactly when something feels aligned or when it doesn't. And that process takes time. It takes time and it takes patience to unlearn, to recalibrate. Because when we have spent years adapting, years overriding our systems, overriding our signals, we can't just expect them to become clear overnight. It is a slow remembering, it is a slow rebuilding of our trust in our body, of our trust in our feelings, and trust in our inner knowing, trust in our intuition. So today I just want to leave you on this, on this reflection, on this gentle reflection of, what if you are not broken? What if the things you criticize yourself for are actually the strategies that once kept you safe? What if your system has simply been doing its best with the experiences it lived through? And what if the healing journey is not about you being broken, about you fixing yourself, but about remembering how to listen again? Because the compass is still there. Sometimes it just simply needs a little recalibration and probably a little patience while you relearn how to hear it again, how to recognize your inner compass again. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, petals.